Welcome everyone. This is a special masterclass because this is a masterclass that is based on probably my most fundamental work. The project that I'm taking on right now is almost as big as Mindvalley in itself. It is the biggest program we've ever launched at Mindvalley. So big that it's not just involving me, but hundreds of the world's greatest minds. More on that in a bit. What you're going to learn in this class with the 50,000 people who are also tuned in is a framework for rethinking, redefining, hacking, transforming almost every aspect of the world you live in. From how you learn, to how you love, to how you see yourself, how you work, how you parent. Now that's a lot of stuff to cram into a 1-hour class. So rather than go into these details, what I'm going to give you instead is a framework so powerful that if you understand this, you get to view the world the way I view it, as something that is malleable, that you can transform, that you can shift, that you have absolute power over. This framework has transformed thousands of lives, and you're going to get it in its entirety here in this masterclass. So, firstly, welcome to Mindvalley's Technology Center. This is our boardroom. I love working here. It's a place that gives me so much inspiration. And rather than just show you screens in my computer, I wanted this to be a little bit more intimate. So we'll be combining screenshots from my laptop, slides to explain what we're talking about, with live footage of me talking directly to you. Today we're going to talk about consciousness engineering. And before we go into what is consciousness engineering, I want to tell you about an experience I had 6 years ago when in almost every sense of the word I stepped into an alternate reality. What happened was I decided to go and spend a week with the Achuar tribes people. Now the Achuar are a tribe in the Ecuadorian Amazon forest. They had only been discovered by modern man in the late 1970s. And so this tribe still preserves most of its way of life. And what I saw there was so incredibly beautiful, but also so incredibly bizarre by normal human definitions, right? So we're not judging the Achuar, but I want to show you what I experienced because it shifted my thinking of the rest of the world. Now, rather than describe what I experienced in the Amazon, we're instead going to imagine that a new neighbor moved into your neighborhood. Let's say his name is Sam, and Sam lives life like the Achuar. So one day Sam invites you to come and spend time with his family. So you walk into Sam's home, and he asks you if you want a drink. You say, sure, Sam, give me a glass of water. Sam goes, no, you know, in our home, we don't drink water. And you go, well, what do you drink? And he goes, alcohol. And you tell him, is that the only thing you drink? And Sam goes, yes, the only thing we drink here is alcohol. Would you like to try some? So of course, you know, you're thinking if this is the alcohol, which is the only substance this family drinks, it must be really good. Yes, I'd love a glass. So Sam hands you a glass of his homemade alcohol. And you taste it, and the taste is hard to describe. When I tasted this, it's called shisha in the Achuar, with the Achuar community in the Ecuadorian Amazon. It was something that I had a really hard time swallowing, but I did it anyway out of respect. And then you ask Sam, what is this? And he goes, oh, that's my wife's saliva. Now this itself is jarring. You see, in the Achuar tribe, they do not drink water. Instead, what happens is the women folk go to a pond. They gather water from the pond. This is the same pond they bathe in, so it's basically bath water. They then put this in bowls, earthenware bowls. In their mouth, they take certain roots that they've harvested from the ground. They chew these roots, and the women folk spend hours after hours after hours chewing these roots in their mouth and then spitting it out into this pond water. This causes the saliva, and the bacteria in the saliva causes the fermentation to occur. The fermentation creates alcohol, which cleans the pond water, and what you now have is shisha, the drink that the Achuar people drink. That itself seems weird. You are drinking the saliva, the spit of the women folk of this tribe, that's how they survive. But it gets weirder. Sam asks you if you want to spend the night, and you say yes because you really want to discover this weird world that Sam lives in. So you go to bed, and it's a normal bed, it's comfortable, but at 4 a.m., Sam bursts through the door and wakes you up, and he says, hey, are you awake? It's time to have tea. So you get up and you say, look, I'll be happy to have tea with you. Let me just go brush my teeth. And he goes, no, we don't have toothbrushes in this home. Instead, drink this tea. It'll solve the same problem. So he gives you this tea, and it's an interesting taste, and it tastes good. But as soon as you finish taking it, you feel the uncontrollable urge to puke. And you go to the bathroom and you start puking and puking and puking, and you realize everyone in the family is puking, but they are smiling about it. They then gather back in the circle. Sam, knowing that everyone has now finished their morning puke, goes into a discussion on your dreams. And everyone in that family circle starts talking about their dreams, their lucid dreams, adventures they had in their dreams, insights, intuitions that came to them while they were asleep. Except you, because you're a modern man, you can barely remember what you dreamt about. But to the rest of them, their dream world is as real as our physical world. But the story doesn't end there. Later on that day, Sam asks you if you'd like to pray to the gods with him. And you're expecting an altar or a shrine, but instead he gives you a medicine. It's what we now call ayahuasca. You take it, and again you have the uncontrollable urge to puke because ayahuasca is a poison. But then as you lie down on that couch, you have the most insane visions. It's like you're seeing the world as fractals, and insights, downloads come to you. And you realize now how the Achua communicate with what they say are higher powers. Now, think about all of that, right? Not drinking water, praying with ayahuasca as a drug to help you connect to a higher power, having morning discussions at 4 a.m. with family people over your dreams. All of these are so different from anything that you would experience in modern society. Yet to the Achua, it's completely real. We might say it's bizarre, but think about it. To the Achua people looking at our life, we would be completely primitive and bizarre. Because let's look at the statistics. If you look at modern human society, there are so many amazing things we've built, but there are so many things that we're doing right now which are fundamentally failing. Think about this. Over 50% of marriages end in divorce. Yet, we go into marriage promising we will be together till death do us part. So many people in modern societies like America are developing allergies. Allergies that are not as apparent in other parts of the world. Peanut allergies, for example. Allergies to nuts are dominant in many American kids, not in French children. And then look at work. In a recent Gallup study, close to 50% of Americans are dissatisfied with work. Yet we spend 70% of our waking hours at work, yet half of us are unhappy about it. So even our work life is, in a way, a failure. We're doing something with our waking hours that we fundamentally feel dissatisfied with. Then you look at learning. Yes, we learn, but most people, when they reach adulthood, stop learning after college. And not only do they stop learning, but learning is seen as a pain because when they were growing up, they were put into schooling systems that through standardized testing, boring lectures, uninspired teachers, made them take what is such a core aspect of human life, learning and growth, and made it a chore. So they see learning as something that you do not want to do, and they'd much rather vegetate in front of a television. Now, look at exercise and health. There is a health movement going on. We're moving towards healthier foods. But still today, 1 in 3 American children are obese. In some countries, 40 to 60% of adult populations are obese. So obviously, in terms of our health, we also haven't really nailed it. So you can look at almost every aspect of human society, and there are things that the Achua people might find fundamentally bizarre. One of the most bizarre, and it's so alien that we don't even see how strange it is this. Remember what I said about the Achua people coming together at 4 a.m. discussing their dreams. So I was having a conversation with Ken Wilber, who is one of America's greatest living philosophers. And I asked Ken, what is it that you would change about the education system? What is one of the primary gaps? And he says, well, our modern Western education system teaches us to function in the physical world, but unlike indigenous cultures, they do not teach us to function with our spirit, with our soul. Think about the Achua people and how to them, the dream world is completely real. To us, most people barely know how to meditate. So if you look at all of these things, there are aspects about our culture that are, you could say, fundamentally broken. How do we go about fixing them? What we are looking to do with consciousness engineering is to look at why are these things broken, look at the root cause, and then give people a framework to patch up all these areas of their life that can be transformed. So we look at love, human learning, work, careers, meaning, We look at situations where people are growing up in guilt or shame due to dogma that was imported on them. We look at how people exercise, how they read books, how they create new products or companies. And for each of these things, we're seeking out optimized models that are better than what are out there in the world. The thing is, all of these models exist. There are better ways to do all of these things. And when you stumble upon some of these newer models, my God, it is mind-blowing. Here at Mindvalley, we spend so much time just talking about, amongst ourselves, these new models that we're discovering. New models of everything from how to read a book at 10x the regular speed to how to get in amazing shape without having to go through fad diets or without over-exercising. New models are emerging all the time on how to transform every area of how you live life. The problem is, they don't get into the education system. So there's a lot of innovation right now in education in terms of technology. There's very little innovation in terms of curriculum. Consciousness engineering is our project to bring together many of the world's greatest minds to create a new curriculum for education. It is vast, it transforms multiple dimensions of being human, but to use it, you have to learn the framework that I'm about to teach you. So in this class, we're going to cover the reasons why we view and we function in the world the way we do. And when you can see this, you take the first step towards coming out of these patterns. Then I'm going to give you an exercise that you can do to carve up your life into 12 different dimensions. And I'm going to give you a thought process to apply to these dimensions so that you get to have extraordinary success in all of these areas. This is not just goal setting. This is a far more advanced process that sets you on the path to consciousness engineering, to being able to advance, develop, expand your awareness of the multitude of possibilities out there in terms of new beliefs you can take on in the world and new systems you can apply to truly live extraordinary. So let's get started. So let me give you an idea of what I've been able to do once I learned consciousness engineering and what I went through before figuring it out. So I grew up in an Indian family. And if you grew up in an Indian family, you know that there's always a big push to be a lawyer or a doctor or an engineer. So I decided that I wanted to study computer engineering. But it wasn't because I genuinely loved computer engineering. In fact, I couldn't stand math. And computer engineering requires a lot of math. But in the school I went to, the general rule was that if you were smart, you became an engineer. So I worked my butt off to get good grades. I hated what I was doing, but I worked my butt off to get good grades. I got into a college. I didn't go to a college I really wanted to. I went to the University of Michigan. Cold, frigid Michigan, because they had a good computer engineering school. I enrolled in that computer engineering school, and for the next 4 years, I hated college. I didn't enjoy the lectures. I sucked at my mathematics classes. I was a failing student. My GPA was under 2.5. The only classes I enjoyed were theater, were photography, were classes in arts, but I couldn't do that because, you know, society says you can't make money as an artist. So I became a computer engineer. And I remember the day I had my interview with Microsoft. This was a big deal. Microsoft interviews people all around the world, and only 1% get flown to Seattle for the final rounds and then come in as interns. I made that 1%. I got a job at Microsoft. I remember getting my own office, 3 computer monitors. I was working on a team called the Windows Shell team to help refine and improve the Windows operating system as a bug tester. And I hated it. I realized that for 5 years I'd been bracing for this moment. Everyone I knew was excited that I got into Microsoft. My family was happy. But in my first week of the job, I realized how miserable I was. And I was so miserable that I sucked at it. My manager started giving me warning letters, and 11 weeks after getting that job, I was fired. And when I was fired, I remember being in a taxi, driving to the airport in Seattle to fly back home. I was happy. I had certainly realized that I'd been chasing the wrong career for almost 5 years. So what did I do then? I started doing what I really loved. I worked for a nonprofit. I became a meditation instructor. I experimented with everything from being a photographer to writing. None of these made me as much money, but I loved doing it. And as I continued learning, growing, I continued studying. I went through ups and downs. There were times when I was unemployed. There were times when I was completely broke. If you were to go through, in fact, recently, I shared my resume, list of jobs I had as I was growing up on Facebook. And the post went viral because it is hilarious how all over the place I was. I'd been a dishwasher, I'd been a photojournalist, I had been a nonprofit vice president, I had been unemployed multiple times. But as I went through this journey, I learned, I continued growing and learning and growing, and that led to where I am today. So let's look at my career today, right? Today, I'm in an interesting position. I consider myself extremely lucky. I've hacked my life so that every 6 months, I get all expenses paid to go for a vacation on a paradise island. I get to stay in a 5-star hotel. I've been to places like Hawaii, Costa Rica, Maui, Dubrovnik, Croatia. And in this 5-star hotel, they give me the presidential suite. I get to spend a week in the presidential suite at the world's greatest hotels every 6 months, but it gets better. Some of the world's most remarkable individuals, from movie stars to writers to CEOs to scientists and engineers, fly down from all across the world to come and join me in this hotel at their expense. 200 to 300 people at a time. At night, we have the most amazing dinners and celebrations and parties, and I get to connect and mingle as the host with everyone there. In the daytime, we gather together and share best practices and discussion groups and share ideas on personal growth and living and transforming the world. This is what my passion is, connecting with people, having fun, celebration, but also learning and growth. Now, I've hacked my life so that every 6 months I get to experience this. And this to me is like a career, just like being a doctor or an engineer, but it's so much more fun. Now, if you've been following my work, you know that I'm talking about Awesomeness Fest. I built that up as a separate company 6 years ago, and that's what it's given me right now. If I were to do nothing else except Awesomeness Fest, I would be a truly happy man, because I'd have friends who are among the most influential people in the world. I get to celebrate and play in the most exotic locations. I get to learn and grow. Now, I could go from being a broke, unhappy engineer, from being unemployed, to creating a life where I have Awesomeness Fest because of this process of rethinking and hacking the world that I've been fine-tuning for the last decade. And I know that if you learn this too, no matter where you are in your life, you'd be able to shape these new visions for yourself. Awesomeness Fest isn't a career path. Nobody goes to school to get a degree on how to start their own movement or festival. And so this isn't an education in anything which is a set career path or a set way of building the world. Rather, it's an education in how to think so you can see the world as malleable, as something where you can step outside the bounds of how normal human beings think and create your own structures for your own happiness, for the own things that give you meaning. So now you can see just how powerful this is. You can see how this can take you from being dissatisfied in your career to creating whole new aspects of work or career that do not currently exist in modern society. But now we got to give you the thinking mechanism to get you there. So let's get started. The first thing you have to understand to be a master of consciousness engineering is how human beings evolved. See, we learn evolution. But a lot of us have the wrong idea of evolution. We think that mankind evolved slowly from apes to Neanderthals to Homo erectus to Homo sapiens. That was an older model of evolution. Today, scientists, anthropologists know that actually multiple types of humans existed on the planet at the same time. Homo neanderthalis was a human. That's Neanderthals. Homo florensis were humans. These were humans who were about 3.5 feet tall and lived in islands near Indonesia. There was Homo erectus, Homo habilis, Homo sapiens. All of these were human beings, but one survived. The one that survived was the Homo sapien. Why is it that Neanderthals died out, even though they had bigger brains, even though they were brawnier, even though they had been on the planet longer than Homo sapiens? Well, anthropologists think that it's because Homo sapiens had developed the faculty of language. See, early apes could say phrases such as, "Look out, there's a tiger." But humans could say, "Hey, don't go to the river until midday because I saw a tiger wandering along the area." Now, as language developed, it allowed us to create constructs in our mind, constructs that made Homo sapiens superior to other humans of that time. Now, this is a mind-blowing idea to think that we were once not the only humans on the planet, but we dominated the others. Because of language, we went into what Yuval Harari, in his book Sapiens, calls the cognitive revolution. Language allowed us to separate ourselves from animals. It allowed us to create stories, mythology, meaning, religion, villages, tribes. It allowed us to mobilize, to create culture, to create nations, city-states. Language allowed us to thus function in two worlds. There's the physical world. Every human being will agree on certain aspects of the physical world. We agree that rain falls from the sky and is made of water. We agree that a particular rock might be gray or black or white. But there's a second world we live in, and this is the world of mental constructs that we've created in our head because of our ability to use words and language. This is a world where you have things which are non-tangible. See, that revolution started 30,000 years ago. In Yuval Harari's book, he shows you the image of this particular wood carving that was discovered. It shows a lion with the body of a man. Now think about that for a moment. A lion with the body of a man doesn't exist, but it can exist in the human mind. And because of that mental construct, the human being could go out and create a representative of this. Thoughts and ideas shape our world. Now, it's not just wood carvings. Think about the concept of a company. Again, in the book, Yuval Harari talks about the idea that a company is really nothing more than a piece of paper that gives certain rights to an organization. So, a company may not have an office, it may not have any products, it may not have any employees, but as long as that piece of paper exists, we agree that the company is real. Likewise, our laws. You cannot see a law or touch a law, but laws, from the laws of Hammurabi from 3,000 years ago to the Declaration of Independence and the Bill of Rights, all help us run and govern our physical world. But you cannot see or touch a law. Now let's go to something deeper. God. What is God? You cannot see God, you cannot touch God, but according to at least one person I've interviewed, Tom Chi, the inventor of the Google Glass, God exists and is real because it exists as a syntax in the human mind. Likewise, meditation. Meditation isn't something you can see. You can see someone in a particular pose that might be meditation, but you cannot see or touch meditation. Yet, meditation, even though it's just a concept in the human mind, over 1,400 studies shows that it actually has beneficial effects on the human body. So our mental constructs have an impact in the world. Our thoughts and beliefs literally shape our world. Whether you are an Achuar tribes person or you're a modern American male, your thoughts and beliefs create your world. In 1997, as a photographer, I traveled to the former Yugoslavia. I was a photojournalist back then, and I was there to take photography of the former Yugoslavia that had just come out of an extremely devastating war. What had happened in the former Yugoslavia is that groups of people who spoke the same language, who were the same ethnicity, had gone to war with each other. And in that time, from 1992 to 1995, Europe saw some of its most devastating horrors since World War II. I remember visiting the city of Sarajevo, and it was shocking to learn about the crimes, the murders, the pillaging that had happened there. Over 156,000 people died in that war in 3 years. 10,000 people were missing. 2.3 million people were displaced. It was the most devastating conflict in Europe since World War II. But here's what I found interesting. When I was in Sarajevo as a photojournalist, I took these photographs. These photographs showed buildings that had been burnt down or had their upper floors taken apart by sniper fire. I saw bullet holes on walls, men with no legs because they had stepped on landmines. Even the mannequins in Sarajevo were sad. There was so much grief and sadness in that city because it had just come out of a war 6 months before I went there. What I found mind-blowing, hard to swallow, painful almost, was that so much death and destruction occurred in that area because beliefs went dysfunctional. These were people who had one way of believing in God, fighting with other people who were the same ethnicity, spoke the same language because they had another way of believing in God. We won't get into the politics of what happened, but it was enough to see that when beliefs get warped, through bad leadership, bad ideas, through ideas such as us versus them, human beings can do absolutely insane things. So we know that beliefs have the power to destroy. But on the flip side, I've also witnessed situations where the right beliefs, the right models of the world have the capacity to create absolutely amazing things. So I want to share with you another beautiful journey I had from 2 months ago where I got to meet one of America's greatest inventors. So maybe you've heard of a Segway. That's me riding around in a Segway. You can see how excited I am to be riding that machine. It's a beautiful device. I got to visit the home of the inventor of the Segway. He didn't just invent the Segway, he invented multiple new machines and tools which are changing lives around the world. That's his island, North Dumpling Island in Long Island Sound. Dean thinks about the world in a very different way. That's Dean's home on North Dumpling Island. It's a former lighthouse. And I want to show you this. This is a view from the top of that lighthouse. Now you'll notice how tiny the island is. You'll see several helicopters there. Dean owns his own helicopter company. And you'll see a wind turbine. And you'll see a windmill. So the story begins with the windmill you see in this video. Dean told me the story. It is hilarious, but it also shows just how much you can do when you think outside the box, when you think outside the rules of modern society. So Dean wanted to erect a windmill on North Dumpling Island, but he had to get permission from the state of New York. Now, the state of New York said, absolutely not. Windmills make noise. Your neighbors will be complaining. Now, Dean was very frustrated. He can't stand bureaucrats. He said, look, guys, it is an island. I own the entire island. There are no neighbors to complain. But still, the state of New York would not let him erect the windmill. So Dean decided to do what any normal, intelligent man who refuses to give up would do. He decided he was going to secede from the state of New York. Instead, in fact, he decided, forget just New York, I'm going to secede from the United States of America because I cannot deal with this bureaucracy. And Dean did just that. He found a loophole in constitutional law. He went and visited one of the foremost constitutional lawyers from Harvard, found a loophole, and decided that North Dumpling Island isn't really part of the United States. It never was. When the Declaration of Independence was signed, North Dumpling Island had its own Declaration of Independence, modeled just after the US Declaration, but with a few lines changed. Lines on, for example, the worth of slaves. Now, Dean went further. He created a constitution for North Dumpling Island, his own currency, the dumpling dollar, his own diplomatic stamp, his own national anthem. But he didn't stop there. He signed a non-aggression pact with the United States president of that time. That's Dean with the president. Being an incredible American inventor, he knew all the presidents from Bill Clinton to George Bush. He had George Bush sign a non-aggression pact declaring that the United States would never invade North Dumpling Island. Now, the bureaucrats in New York were not amused, so they sent him more letters saying, take down the windmill or you'll be in trouble. Now, what he did then is he took that letters and he sent it to major New York newspapers and he said, look at the gall of these politicians in New York State. They are threatening a head of state of a foreign nation. And soon the bureaucrats stopped sending him letters because every time they sent him letters, he would flip it around and send it to the New York newspapers. Now at this point, an American morning show got interested, so they decided to film a show on the newest nation in North America. And Dean told me the story about how he went to the TV host and he said, would you like to exchange your US dollars for the dumpling dollar? And the TV host said, oh, come on, Dean. The dumpling dollar, we know it isn't real. And this was Dean's reply. He said, well, actually, it is. Let me tell you this. Your American dollar was once backed on the gold reserve, but the gold reserve was taken away. So technically, your American dollar is backed on nothing. Our dumpling dollar, on the other hand, is backed by Ben and Jerry's ice cream. Dean, being friends with Ben and Jerry, had actually gotten Ben and Jerry, the original Ben and Jerry, to declare that they would back up the dumpling dollar with Ben and Jerry's ice cream. And so Dean told the TV host, so your US dollar is basically backed by nothing. Ours is backed by ice cream, which A, is something, and secondly, since it's cooled to 0 degrees centigrade, 32 degrees Fahrenheit, it's rock solid, unlike your US dollar. Now, Dean didn't stop there. He then donated $100 in foreign aid to the United States. That is a certificate from President George Bush, thanking North Dumpling Island for its foreign aid donation to the United States of $100. Dean thus made North Dumpling Island the first nation in the world to give foreign aid to the United States. Now you may be wondering, what's the point? All for a windmill? Actually, no. See, the reason Dean did all of this is because he loves America. What he really wanted to do was get press and PR around his new project, which is called FIRST. It's a robotics competition. I got to attend it recently. And FIRST is amazing. FIRST is where American high school kids build robots that battle it out with each other. You can see they're as excited about this as kids who are watching a football game. Because Dean believes that unless America invests more in teaching its kids science, technology, engineering, and math, it will never be able to be the leading innovative nation on the planet. And this is really important to him. That's a group of kids that take part in FIRST, and it's amazing to see what these children can do. So all of this was not just an exercise for Dean's ego. It wasn't about starting your own country. I'm sure that was fun. But it was a way Dean wanted to think outside the box, hack the rules of normal society, get his windmill, but also figure out a way where he could create immense PR for one of his projects, which is to transform education in the United States so that more children can be engineers. Dean Kamen is one of the men in the world I respect the most because of how he thinks. But if Dean shows us anything from that story, it's the idea that you can bend the rules. I'm not talking about rules of law. Don't try bending those. Dean didn't either. But when you learn to think outside the box, you do not have to start your own country. But when you learn to think outside the box, you can make incredible things happen. And if you want to truly be one of those people that we call visionaries or creative thinkers or extraordinary folks, you have to be able to look at the rules on how society works right now and figure out what it is that you refuse to follow because it just doesn't make sense. So let's talk about bending the rules for a moment. And we're going to look at another really remarkable American inventor. In his bio, this is what was said of him. At the root of his reality distortion field was his belief that rules did not apply to him. He had evidence for this. In his childhood, he had often been able to bend reality to his desires. He had a sense that he was the chosen one. He thinks that there are few people who are special like Einstein and Gandhi and the gurus he met in India, and he's one of them. Now that man was Steve Jobs. That was what Walter Isaacson said of Steve Jobs in his famous biography. This clip of Steve always gives me goosebumps.
When you grow up, you tend to get told that the world is the way it is, and your life is just to live your life inside the world, try not to bash into the walls too much, try to have a nice family life, have fun, save a little money. That's a very limited life. Life can be much broader once you discover one simple fact, and that is everything around you that you call life was made up by people that were no smarter than you. And you can change it, you can influence it, you can build your own things that other people can use. Once you learn that, you'll never be the same again.
Everything around you that you call life was made up by people no smarter than you. And you can change it, you can influence it. Once you learn that, you'll never be the same again. I love that quote by Steve Jobs because of the one line in there that says, made up by people no smarter than you. And if you think about it, almost everything about our life, from the idea of 9-to-5 work, to the idea of how we raise our kids, to everything about what we eat, how to exercise, many of it is merely being blindly followed. So your step to be a consciousness engineer is to learn to evolve beyond that. So let's talk about how to evolve beyond the patterns of life that were made up by people no smarter than you. First, to evolve beyond the patterns, you have to see the patterns. Question is, can you see something if you don't have a name for it? So in ancient times, there's an idea that people could not see the color blue. There was this article that was circulating around the internet recently, and it was based on a really interesting study. See, historians, scientists who were looking at ancient cultures noticed something weird. If you look at the ancient Chinese or the ancient Greeks, there's hardly any mention of the color blue in their literature. For example, even in Homer's Iliad, Homer doesn't refer to the Aegean Sea as blue. He calls it the wine dark sea. Isn't that odd? Wine dark rather than a color. So they wondered, is it true that ancient cultures could not see the color blue? Now, an anthropologist decided to research this by doing a study on the Himba tribe of Namibia. So the Himba tribe are an actual tribe where in their language they do not have a word for the color blue. They have multiple words for the color green, but nothing for the color blue. So the Himba was shown a television screen with a circle of multiple squares. Almost all the squares are green, but one is blue. Can you see the blue square? Take a moment. Obviously, you can. But to the Himba people, the tribe with no word for the color blue, they could not see that blue square. That blue square was essentially invisible to them. To them, it was just another type of green. But when the Himba was shown this image, this is a series of green squares. One of them, however, is a slightly unusual color of green. Can you see the unusual square? Well, to some of us, we might. To most of us, it might be hard. That's it. The Himba could instantly spot it out. So the question is, why couldn't the Himba see the color blue? They had no word for the color blue. Is that why it was invisible to them? If this study is true, it raises the interesting question, do you really see something if you don't have a word for it? So what we're going to do is give you a word so you can see the patterns. We'll give you words to see the patterns behind you, and then give you words to see the patterns ahead of you, new patterns that you can evolve into. So first, let's look at human evolution of consciousness. We start with humans. Hundreds of thousands of years ago, there existed multiple types of humans. Neanderthals, Homo sapiens, Homo erectus. One dominated, the Homo sapien. The Homo sapien dominated because it had words, it had language. This allowed Homo sapiens to create cultures, beliefs, mythology, to create their world. From cultures, beliefs, mythology, the thing is, there is a level beyond pure culture and beliefs. Most Homo sapiens, most people in the world today, are still bound by their cultures and beliefs. Few evolve to the next level. We could call this an advanced level of consciousness, where they can see that cultures and beliefs are simply patterns, frameworks that came generation to generation. To go into advanced consciousness, you are stepping outside these patterns. You are stepping outside these cultures and beliefs. You can see them for what they are, a beautiful part of your upbringing, of your culture, but not something that needs to hold you or ground you or keep you at a certain level. If you became an engineer solely because you felt that was the right path to go, you are buying into a culture or belief that may not make any sense. Now, in the future, there may be other levels that evolve. Scientists like Ray Kurzweil have spoken about humans and machines uniting to create new kinds of intelligence. We'll talk about that later. But right now, this is where we are evolving into. Cultures and beliefs to advance consciousness. When you learn the tools I'm about to give you in this webinar, you learn to step out of the matrix of cultures and beliefs which hold so many people back. But to begin, we have to give you a new word, a word to see the patterns, and that word is brule. A brule is a bullshit rule. That's it. Bullshit rule. And we create rules in every aspect of human society to adopt and simplify our understanding of the world. All nations have their rules. Some make absolute sense and are beautiful. Some are chains that absolutely weigh you down. Religion can have immense beauty, but also immense dogma that creates guilt and shame and restrictions. You could view these dogma as rules. Question is, if so many of these rules make no sense, why do we blindly follow them? The answer comes from evolutionary biology. Evolutionary biology hardwires us to be an animal that needs to socialize, that exists and works best in a tribe or a community. Now, in tribes and communities, knowledge is often passed down through beliefs, through aspects of understandings of the world. A scientist called Paul Marston calls this memetics and social contagion. Marston says, evidence shows that we inherit and transmit behaviors, emotions, beliefs, and religions, not through rational choice, but through contagion. When we are unsure of how to react to a stimulus or a situation, these theories suggest that we actively look to others for guidance and then we consciously imitate them. That's so true about our world. So a lot of things about our life come from these beliefs that we are imitating. So if you're looking at rules, you could be going back all the way to 2,000 years ago and looking at rules in your culture or mythology or religion. We aren't going to do that in this training because those are so different for different people around the world. That is something you would do on your own. For the purpose of this training, what we are going to look at though are rules from the last 100 years. Rules that we have in our world today that come from an industrial age education model. One of the biggest areas of these rules, and to give you an idea of what to look for, would be the rules around your career. So I stated at the start of this webinar that in a recent study, almost half of people in America, 50%, are dissatisfied with their work. Let's look at why that happens, right? And let's actually look at one particular career which is incredibly important in America, but because of rules around that career leads to so much depression and pain. We're going to look at lawyers. I used to work in the legal industry. I was creating and working for a company that sold software to lawyers. So I was working in this company and I had to spend a lot of time on the phone talking to lawyers. One of the common trends which I noticed was just how depressed lawyers were. It was almost painful to see. Let's look at what happens and why have we created a world where hundreds of thousands of people go into an occupation where there's a 52% dissatisfaction rate. In the words of Martin Seligman, in a recent poll, 52% of practicing lawyers describe themselves as dissatisfied. Certainly, the problem is not a financial one. As of 1999, associates at top firms could earn up to $200,000 per year just starting out. So most lawyers are dissatisfied at their jobs. Yet, law schools in America produce hundreds of thousands of new lawyers every year. America has 5% of the world population, but 70% of the world's lawyers. Why does this happen? Let's look at the mindset of a college kid deciding to go into law, right? I was sitting with a friend of mine last night having drinks. His name is Gavin. Gavin studied law for 5 years. In his 5th year, he remembers himself, and he was telling me last night, he was sitting in a lecture hall, and the professor told him, you guys need to brace yourself for depression. You are not going to be happy doing this job, but you must do it. And that's when Gavin decided to walk out of that auditorium, quit his degree, and instead he became a writer. And he was telling me how much happier he is right now. He just wishes he had the guts to quit earlier. So let's look at the mindset that people like Gavin sometimes get trapped into. So like many of you, I grew up in the 1990s. I was a child of the 90s. You probably remember TV shows, LA Law, Ally McBeal, TV shows that glamorize law. So kids watching these TV shows all of a sudden have an idea in their head of what law might be like. They don't research it, they don't look at the real world, it's just an idea. Kids go to college. In America, like me, many people go to college with no idea of what they were going to study. I at least knew I was going to do computer engineering. But while at college, many kids have yet to choose their degree. Now, influenced by what they see on television, they decide that law might be good. Now, they've bought into a rule that the point of education is not necessarily to have fun, to learn what gives you passion, but to brace you for a career where you will toil and slog, but at least earn a wage. And so many people study law, like Gavin, hating what they are studying, but doing it because they feel that is the only way they can be a decent contributing member of society. So you work your butt off trying to get good grades so you can get into law school. If you don't make it to law school, you feel sad. If you do make it to law school, you again have to study and work your butt off, going through paper after paper, exam after exam, so that you can get good grades and maybe get accepted in a partnership firm. Now, when you get accepted as a partner, and maybe get accepted in a firm. When you get accepted into a firm, congratulations. You have now theoretically succeeded. You are in what is now the highest paying career in America. 200 grand a year for just someone starting out. But odds are you're going to be miserable and you're going to be depressed. And that's why so many people drop out of law. Yet they waste hundreds of thousands of dollars. They waste years of their life pursuing it anyway. Like me, they fell into a trap. they believed that there was only one operational manual for living in the world. To me, it was I had to be an engineer even though I hated mathematics. To them, it is they had to be a lawyer because it was the highest paying career, they would gain respect, failing to see just how sad they would be because they failed, like Gavin, to pursue their true passion, whether it's writing or travel or something else. I went from being an engineer to being a meditation instructor, and people told me you cannot make money teaching meditation. Meditation instructors, that's a part to being broke. I didn't. I'm worth a lot because I became a meditation instructor. I simply could see that buying into the standard rules of society isn't the optimal path. So the first step is you must see that the rules that society says you have to follow to get from here to there often make no sense. But millions of people blindly follow these rules anyway. Let's look at some of these rules. What rules are you buying into right now? Let's look at common rules regarding life. Every woman needs a man. I know many women, I have many female friends who are in their 40s or 50s who are single, and when I'm talking to them, they are sad because they haven't yet found the perfect man. But who in the first place says that at the age of 40 or 50, you need to be in a long-term relationship? Another rule, aging is a part of life. I know people who look like they have truly aged at the age of 60. And I have friends like that Mindvalley author Bert Goldman who are pushing 90 and are so filled with life and youth. Religion is needed for salvation. When I was teaching meditation classes, a common problem I would see was that many successful people would come to these classes and their problem setting bigger goals, thinking beyond, was guilt because they were trained to believe they were born a sinner. Is that really real? Or was that simply an indoctrination process that emerged historically in the church, which we are blindly following today? Males and females need different job roles. There are ideas out there that say that women are better at roles which involve relationships and psychology. That's why there are more nurses, there are more kindergarten teachers who are women. Men are better at roles that require engineering or math or science. Is that true? When I was with Dean Kamen, observing teams of teenagers competing in the robotics competition at First Robotics, one of the things that struck me was how in almost all these teams there was a healthy gender balance. 50% of these kids who were building robots were women. So where does that rule even come from? Love is painful. So many of us go through heartbreak at some point in our life, and then we take on a rule that says that I need love, I need someone else. You complete me, one of the biggest rules of all time. But because they experience heartbreak with loved ones, they create a rule in their head that love is necessary, but it is going to be painful. Now let's look at rules in work. The pursuit of money is wrong. The idea that to be rich is somehow wrong or bad leaves so many people stuck in poverty. Success equals hard work. This is one of the rules I believe in my early years, that I had to work and slog it out and be under stress to be successful, because that's what those other guys who work 70 to 100-hour weeks were doing. Not true anymore. I have more success now, and I feel like I'm never working because I genuinely love what I do. Another rule, working 9 to 5. At Mindvalley, we have no set holidays. We have no set working hours. People simply work when they want to work, and it works for us. So why do so many companies still operate based on industrial age punch card models? Be realistic in your goals. There's even a whole goal setting methodology called SMART goal setting, S-M-A-R-T. The R in that stands for realistic. Yet most of the extraordinary people in the world I've met never set realistic goals. They set wildly unrealistic goals and then figure out how to get there. Be realistic in your goals is one of the dumbest things we are putting into people because it makes people stuck in mediocrity. We need college degrees. Right now, if you look at companies like Google or Mindvalley, 15% of people at Google and Mindvalley do not have a college degree. Laszlo Bock, the hiring head of Google, said that at Google right now, 15% of their hires do not have a college degree. It's the same at Mindvalley. We have stopped looking at college degrees because we've found that many of the best and brightest people we've hired came straight to us from high school. I question the need for a college degree in many circumstances. All of these are rules. If you have your workbook open, circle any of these items that you feel you might be blindly accepting as essential in life, but that you might want to question. So how do you identify your rules? I've given you 10 common ones, but there are hundreds of rules out there, and everyone will have their own rules based on how they grew up, or their upbringing, or their culture, or their society. One of the fundamental ways to identify a rule is to look at it from this point of view. Is what you believe relative truth or absolute truth? This comes from the work of Ken Wilber. If what you believe to be about the world is absolute truth, it means every culture, every society, every human being agrees that this is real. Parents must take care of their children. That's absolute truth. Across all human society, people agree that parents must take care of their children when these kids cannot take care of themselves. Relative truth might be a particular way of prayer, or a particular way of respecting God, or a particular way of eating, or a particular way of going into a love relationship, because different cultures see it differently. Here's the key point. The only reason we see it the way we do, the only reason we drink water while the Achua people drink chicha, is because that was our upbringing. It is not because of rational choice. So when you understand that almost every aspect of what you believe to be true, whether it's an aspect of your religion or how you see work or your ideas of marriage, it is not absolute truth. It is there only because you were the product of your culture, your religion, your society, your era. And you can change that because many of these things were not developed through rational choice or scientific studies or optimized thinking. You can change that. So here are 5 questions to ask about your beliefs to see if these are supporting you and pushing you forward or if these are rules. The first is that belief based on trust and hope in humanity? Is the belief based on the idea that human beings are fundamentally good or fundamentally bad? Beliefs which are based on the idea that human beings are fundamentally bad are almost certainly rules. Beliefs such as women need to dress and cover up in a certain way, because if not, they are enticing men. What is that? That is a belief based on the idea that human beings, men, are fundamentally bad. And women are also fundamentally bad because they are seducers. That is a rule. And as we evolve as human beings, we need to discard beliefs like that. Does it serve your happiness? Beliefs that say that you have to toil and slog 80, 90 hours a week because that is what career success means in your industry is fundamentally a rule. We are here to be happy. And if you do things which are not creating happiness, you are failing at the essential aspect of life itself, which is being here as a soul, having this beautiful human experience and being in bliss and happiness. Does it serve your happiness? Number 3, does it violate the golden rule? Does this rule cause you to do something to someone else that you would not want them doing to you? For example, in corporations, rules on how many companies treat their workers violate the golden rule. If you were to take that CEO or boss and put him in the place of that worker, he probably would not want to be subject to 0 compulsory days of maternity leave if this was America, or firing policies, or hiring policies, or privacy policies. The golden rule is an important indicator of what is a rule. Number 4, did you take it on from culture or religion? Oh, this is a big one, and this is a dangerous one. So I'm not going to go deep in there, but you know what I'm talking about. Are you blindly following things to make your grandparents or your parents happy? Things which you feel uncomfortable with, which are restricting your way of life. Is it because someone has told you that you fail a morality test or you're not moral if you do not follow this? One of the authors we have in our consciousness engineering program, Salma Sidora, says it this way. Morality is simply people saying, I am better than you because my chains are bigger. Does this? So ask yourself, this thing that's restricting me, that's making me uncomfortable, that's holding me back, am I following it simply because I'm the product of my culture or religion, and if I chose not to follow it, I disappoint my parent or my grandparents? And finally, was it based on rational choice or imitation? Did you actually think about this? Did you become a lawyer because you genuinely loved studying for the LSAT? You genuinely love defending criminals, which you might sometimes have to do if you're a lawyer? Or did you become a lawyer because you saw it on television and everyone else told you it was a great idea and a great career path? Imitation or rational choice? Now, when you apply these 5 questions to aspects of your life, you start to see if you could be having rules which are holding you back. See, so many people buy all these personal growth books. They go through all of these courses, and that's good because it helps you wake up. But they forget that their growth is slowed down because they are carrying chains. They have these weights around them, and they stubbornly accept these chains as parts of them. Rules are not part of you. Your religion, your culture, they do not make you you. They are layers, they are chains, and if you feel they do not serve you, you have every right to discard them. Outside the rules of physics and the rules of law, all other rules are illusions that we have chosen to believe. So smash the ones that don't support you. So you have a word, rule. You can see the word to help you emerge from the patterns holding you back. Now we give you a tool. I'm a big fan of Buckminster Fuller. And Buckminster Fuller says, if you want to teach people a new way of thinking, don't bother trying to teach them. Instead, give them a tool, the use of which will lead to new ways of thinking. So this is the tool that I'm bringing to the... What I've done so far is shown you just how much more you could be, do, experience in life once you understand that you are being restricted by things that are directly within your control. Fabrics of culture, society, programming, an education system, things your parents told you, things that you see and consume in the world, all of which hold you into a certain pattern of operating. And you can read all the books, you can meditate all you want, but you will not escape from this pattern until you understand that the pattern exists. Now, we're going to give you the tool to help you escape. And that tool is called consciousness engineering.